Good morning and welcome. This is a great looking crowd. I am so enthusiastic about this. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Hub Brown. I'm the Dean of the College of Journalism and Communications, and I welcome you here to our first Sports Collective Symposium. And I'm so happy to see all of you. And you should give yourselves a round of applause because this is nice. Our Sports Collective Symposium is going to be an annual event, first of all, so mark your calendars for next year. But we're going to be exploring issues of sport and society today, and we're going to be talking much, much more about sports in many, many more interesting and engaging ways in the days and years to come. So I want to welcome all of you, welcome all of our guests, welcome our distinguished CJC alumni. You'll meet some of those up here in a few minutes. Our official launch will promote what really is an unrivaled sports program. Before I go further, though, I want to thank Kirk and Michelle Klein for their generous donations, which made this symposium possible. Their daughter Shaylee is in the sports media program here in CJC, so please a round of applause for Kirk and Michelle. Thank you so very much. And speaking of acknowledgments, I think we want to take a brief look, at our sports program, but we would be remiss if we didn't start here with the legendary Red Barber, who started broadcasting 2 years after WRUF went on the air in 1928. And it was the beginning of his Hall of Fame career of decades of sports broadcasting, including the radio broadcasts of the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Yankees. A microphone that he used at WRUF sits in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown today. And over the decades, there's been a great many things that have happened within the college around sports and sports media. But in the last decade, we've had a tremendous amount of growth. In 2010, WRUF became an all-sports formatted radio station, and WRUF.com debuts as well, providing professional, immersive sports experiences for students. That was the beginning of the journey that's brought us here. In 2011, CJC forms a partnership with UAA to house Gator Vision in Weimer Hall. And it always surprises visitors to campus who are going to the football games when we tell them that those things that you see, those pieces that you see on the gigantic screens in the football stadium, those come from Weimer Hall. And many of them, students have had a hand in producing. And so that happened. And then 2011, of course, the partnership with all kinds of different things within Florida Gator athletics. We have lots of people within the college and the athletic department working side by side. RUF became an ESPN affiliate in 2012. And then we put in a new studio, a sports studio, adjacent to the Innovation News Center to continue to support that programming. And then the former dean and professor, the late John Wright, became the inaugural sports journalism and communication director. And so we grew our operation as far as that's concerned. And Dean Wright provided great strides in that and in what we do. That position now is occupied by Eric Esterline. The SEC network officially launched in 2014, and Gator Vision then begins producing athletic broadcasts, live athletic broadcasts for the network, and also produces video board shows for Gator venues, 2014. And the growth of those networks has been a real game changer for us. And that will continue to be the case as we go forward. We'll see how we become a part of that going forward. The sports and media specialization approved in 2016, that provided more focused sports curriculum. You'll see some of the things that we have as far as that's concerned. And then GHQ, just last fall, started to do play-by-play coverage of Gator football games for the students. Student-generated, student broadcast, student run. And it's very, very important for us to give our students the power to make the editorial decisions, to make the kinds of production decisions that they're going to be making in the real world right away. In fact, this is the real world for them. And so we want to make sure that they are able to do the kinds of things that they can do. What it means is that we have had over the years a very illustrious group of alumni who are in sports media. Of course, Aaron Andrews, of course, Christina Pink, who you'll hear from in a little bit, but so many others. All kinds of folks. Andy Friedman, the director in CBS Sports. We have, of course, Surf Melendez, Mandy Perkins, Laura Rutledge in ESPN. So a great many Gators in sports media now, and more to come. And so we want to support them and show the students what is possible, and part of this is about that. So, of course, today we're being we're very comprehensive at the moment, and we're going to be much, much more so. Within our sports and media specialization, we have an emphasis on writing, storytelling, content creation. We are going to talk about values and ethics within sports. And of course, law and the kinds of different things that are happening within sports media in our curriculum. That's where we stand today, and there will be opportunities to do bigger things going forward. The real world experiences, right now, of course, on ESPN Gainesville, we've got reporting and producing. We have, of course, opportunities within sports broadcasting and reporting and anchoring on WUFT, TV and FM. It really is good to have the facilities of WUFT, the PBS station for North Central Florida, the NPR station for North Central Florida. The ability to do all kinds of work around sports within those venues is very, very meaningful for us. In Gator Sports, we're able to do play-by-play. Obviously, the Gator Vision production is taking place, and other things as well. The Reptile Report, again, a student-run broadcast, a student-run show that gives them a chance to do some talk and have some really good fun around that sort of thing. And spring training, of course. Who doesn't love spring training? Every year I note on the calendar when pitchers and catchers report to camp. That's like the first day of spring for me. And it's the first day of spring for a lot of students who are doing a lot of work around baseball. And here in Florida, you take advantage of the opportunity to just go down a couple of hours down the road, and you're able to cover baseball with the major league teams in that spring training venue. It's a great opportunity. And so we'll continue to do those things. We're going to continue to grow what we do in the classroom. This is a look of some of the courses that we have. Data journalism is going to get bigger and bigger as we go forward. We're going to continue to talk about sports media and society. We're going to talk about how sports is viewed and consumed and discussed with all kinds of different populations. And then we're going to be doing much, much more in strategic communication, advertising campaigns, public relations campaigns. And of course, we will not shy from that very, very important conversation about name, image, and likeness, because we know right now that that's going to be one of the major issues affecting amateur sports, college sports today. So we'll be in the thick of that, and we'll be right there as some of the chapters and some of the history of that is being written. You students will be a big part of that. And so we're gonna start there, and we're gonna grow. We also do a lot of research around sports in the CJC. And so this is a look at some of the different subjects that have been explored by faculty and with students oftentimes by their side as research assistants, getting into some of the major issues around sports, around sports media education, around how people are using smartphones to engage with sports, and all kinds of different things as far as that's concerned. And so we will continue to be very, very strong as far as that's concerned. One of my favorite subjects is study abroad. In my previous position, I was able to expand what we did in study abroad. It's very important to me as an administrator to get our students to engage with the world, to leave Gainesville, and not just to go to New York City, but to go to Paris, to go to London, to go all over the world, and especially where sports is happening, because that really right now is kind of the lingua franca of so many things that we're doing out there. It really is one of those things that is an opportunity. And so we explored that opportunity with the NFL study abroad experience in Munich in November, with the NBA experience in Paris back in January, and coming up an opportunity to take students to London to basically work with a Premier League team and take a look at what's going on with football and culture in the United Kingdom. There's a lot that can be said about culture through all kinds of different sports, and especially soccer. And so we'll be able to work with folks abroad to do that. So that's some of the things, but what's next? Well, we're starting here, of course, with our rebranding initiative, and we are beginning the conversation here about expanding what we can do, becoming much, much more focused on careers, much, much more focused on what we can learn to grow the sports enterprise across all 4 majors. And so that's the start here. And then on the horizon, one of the things that we are bringing on a new sports lecturer in journalism. We are doing some work on creative content in MPMT, our media production management and technology major. So a lot of things around the production of sports, around creative content, those sorts of things. Our New York operation, CJC by NYC, has been bringing students over the past year now to New York to work with, particularly in this phase, advertising agencies, public relations concerns in the city. We're going to do a lot more around sports in New York. New York is a sports capital. We mean to be there with some of the things that we're doing as far as sports is concerned there. And then expanding within strategic communication around sports, where we can integrate that with what's happening within strategic communication. So there's a lot that we're involved in. And I tell you, it is a real privilege to be a part of this expansion. It's a real privilege to open the door to this with this symposium. And watch us. If you're wherever you're going to be right now, just watch us. We're going to grow in terms of what we're doing in terms of sports. So right now, what I'd like to do is introduce our featured speaker. That's, of course, CJC alumnus Christina Pink. She, of course, is a top NFL reporter for Fox News. She joined Fox Sports in 2012 as an NFL reporter. Yeah, Fox Sports. I'm sorry, not Fox News. That's like a different operation. So yeah, Fox Sports in 2012 is when Christina joined as an NFL reporter, and she quickly established herself as a trusted and well-informed reporter among players and coaches. Now, during her time at Fox, she has covered AFC playoffs, and Fox Sports college football. She's been a courtside reporter for the LA Clippers on Prime Ticket. And prior to joining Fox Sports, she worked as a sports reporter for WTVJ in Miami and WGNO in New Orleans. She began her professional career in 2008 as a sports anchor reporter at WDBD-TV in Jackson, Mississippi. And while there, she covered Super Bowl 44 in 2010 and the 2010 Pro Bowl in Miami. She also reported from the 2012 NBA Finals on behalf of WTVJ Miami. She began her broadcasting career here during her years at UF, providing Florida athletics feature stories on campus and sportscasting for WUFT-TV and WRUF-AM. And interviewing Christina is journalism senior Caitlin Wajulak. Now please welcome Christina and Caitlin.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello. Oh, goodness.
I gotta tell you before we get started, it is very weird to see my face up there because I'm got into TV to tell other people's stories, so I look up and I was like, whoa, okay. I love the big screen.
Well, first off, thank you, Christina, so much for being here and speaking to all of us today. Just to start off this interview, what inspired you to be a sports journalist?
So as I said, I like telling other people's stories. I've been a sports junkie my entire life, growing up in South Florida, following all the pro teams, the Heat, the Dolphins. But I didn't get into TV I didn't know from, I know a lot of people I talk to say like, oh, I knew I wanted to do this from the time I was a kid. I didn't know. I was going to be a teacher. That was my plan. And then halfway through decided to switch my major. I actually transferred into Florida when I realized that communications was what I wanted to do. My dad was actually the one who told me, he's like, you like to talk. And actually my teachers throughout my childhood also said the same thing. They're like, you love to talk. You're the little chatterbox in class. And my dad had worked in like radio as like a disc jockey DJ. And so he was the one that was like, you know what, you're trying to figure out what you want to do. You like to talk, so why don't you think about communications? And so I walked into the campus. I took a visit to Florida. And this morning I walked around Weimer Hall and I was floored because for me back then, when I walked into the studio on the first floor, it was like, I thought it was CNN. I was like, oh my God, there's green screens and cameras. And so they say you catch the news bug. I got it in that moment. And I just knew. And so, you know, just my love of sports played in, and I started volunteering around campus. And once you come to Florida and you're around big-time college football, you know, falling in love with the culture of the SEC and just the passion and the pageantry of college football and covering it, that changed everything. And, you know, I transferred, I got on campus, and the rest was history.
That's amazing. And, you know, you're talking about you transferred here to UF. And what did you learn while you were here that helped you during your career?
So there's a lot. And for me, I think maybe the first thing was discipline. I was volunteering, I remember, at, like I said, WRUF, but I want to say pretty early on, and I see Steve Russell in the back. Hi, Steve. I remember working the morning line shift when all of my friends were out on like Thursday nights because, you know, nobody goes out on Thursday nights in Gainesville. I was working morning lines on Friday morning, and I remember telling my roommates, like, shh, be quiet because I got to, you know, I got to be up early in the morning. And so like working on campus, I remember coming to the station, like waking up at 3:30, getting there at 5 a.m., doing sports updates when all my friends were out, working spring break when all my friends went to Panama City or on cruises, staying behind. I think my mom sent like Easter meal up to me like on the bus because I was like, I can't come back. And I still work, you know, a lot of holidays, a lot of nights. And then just on the TV side, just, you know, like the principles of like writing lead-ins, writing for broadcast. I remember even starting in radio, learning how to be entertaining with my voice, doing sports updates, where it was integral for me when I got into television. Actually, I remember probably my first beat, I believe, was women's basketball at RUF. And I remember doing my first game. I didn't know that you're supposed to be, you know, objective as a journalist. Things you don't know when you didn't grow up wanting to be a reporter. And I showed up at the game wearing like a, you know, Florida like Gator gear and T-shirts, and like I think Steve saw me walking by and was like, Christina, you're not a fan when you're covering the game. And I was like, oh, you're not? Like I can't cheer. I was like, okay, so you can't cheer. You've got to be objective. But you know, my time here means everything to me. I would not be here. Well, I am here, but I wouldn't have been here without my time at Florida and how much I learned. I mean, just the little things. Like now I don't, you know, work operating camera, but like learning how to operate a camera, you know, learning how to, like I said, write for television, learning how to run my teleprompter, you know, all those little things that throughout my career have all played a role in me getting to the place I am now.
I can relate to the morning line shift. I did one a few semesters
I know.
so early.
On a Friday morning when all my friends were hanging out, and I was like, nope, 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 sorry guys, please keep it down because I've got to get up. But when you love it, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You know, like when you love doing it, it doesn't matter because you just want to do and those little things all pay off in the long run.
Yeah. And so after, you know, all your experiences at UF and you graduated in December of 2007, your first job was in local news in Jackson, Mississippi as a sports anchor and reporter for WDBD-TV. How did the trials of your first job prepare you for your current role?
By the way, when you've done this long enough, like when they were I was reading my bio, I was like, oh yeah, I did do that. Wait, I don't even remember half of these things. I was like, oh wait, that's right. But yeah, so my first job was in Jackson, Mississippi, and I was telling Caitlin about this before. So when I got to my first job in Jackson, it was a startup station, and startups, things don't always go as planned, and so we were launching local news at the station, but it didn't actually start for a year. So I was really excited because I had my first job lined up prior to graduation. And by the way, I was sending out DVDs, which now nobody even owns DVD players, but that's what we were like, putting my resume together, sending DVDs out to every place in the country. But I was really fortunate because my first job, I mean, I was sending it to places I didn't even want to live, but you just want to get your start. So I was in Mississippi, which for me was amazing because it was SEC country, which I knew. But the station didn't start news for a year. And so I got there, we didn't even have a studio built. So for me, it taught me a lot of patience because I had to go around for almost a year. And like, I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna build my Rolodex. And so I went to every high school, all of the local colleges, and just introduced myself. And I was like, hey, I'm Christina. I just want to introduce myself. I want to meet you guys. I'm going to be covering sports here in the area. And you don't often have time to really learn a community when you get your first job. And so for me, I had a year. I didn't choose that, but we had a year to really like learn my way around, meet people throughout the area. Also, I was what is now, an MMJ, back then was called a one-man band. And so I did everything myself. I was running around, shooting all of my stories, covering high school football on Friday nights, recording the games, running back into the studio, trying to put my shot sheets together, trying to look somewhat presentable on air when you've been sweating covering a football game for, like covering 3 high school football games on a Friday night, and then getting it all on the air. When the night's over, you're just like, I did it. And then I think it took me 9 hours to write, 5 stories and get my show together when I first started. But by the time I got out of there, I was able to knock things out so much quicker. So taught me patience, taught me discipline, taught me a lot about building relationships. And those are all things that are still important now.
Yeah, so working your way up in local news all the way up to Fox Sports, did you ever battle with being good enough or dealing with self-doubt when you got to the position that you're at now?
Many times, many times. I'll even say, like, for me, the most recent, the last few years, last year for the first time, so I also work as the sideline reporter for the LA Clippers, and I've been a sideline reporter for 11 years on NFL and NBA, and as we all know, with COVID and people were shifted into different roles that you didn't really expect because the world was unpredictable at the time. And I had to call a game from the booth for the first time in my career. I'm used to talking in 30-second sound bites. They come to me, down to Christina, I give my report and you're done. But we were in a pinch and without, a lot of, we weren't deep in as far as like having other analysts that could fill in. I was mortified. I had never said like, oh yeah, like I want to get in the booth one day. But as our head coach, Teron Lou said, he's like, hey, everybody's got to step up and play different roles. That's what they say to all the players. And so when they asked me to do it, I initially was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Like I can't talk for 3 hours over a live broadcast. But through the encouragement of many of my colleagues, my partner in the booth, which is our play-by-play guy, I stepped in and I was filled with nerves, anxiety. I somehow thought I'd be able to get on the air, call the game, and nobody would know. I was like, I don't want to tell anyone. But it got on social media right beforehand, and it was the best thing I've ever done. When it was over, like the emotions were pouring out of me because I couldn't believe I did this. And this is now me graduating in 2007, so this is now, 14 years into my career last year, 50, however long, I'm trying to take away years. But there's things that you don't think are ever gonna be put on your plate, and to do something that I was terrified to do, didn't wanna do, and for it to go over so well and to push myself out of my comfort zone was so fulfilling in a way that I hadn't really ever expected. Also, in another recent one was just a few years ago. I was when Fox had Thursday Night Football, I was working our Thursday Night Football broadcast for the first time. And at that point, I'd been a sideline reporter for 7 years with Fox, maybe. And so when I got the Thursday Night Football role, they told me like maybe in June, and obviously football season starts in September. I was excited. I was through the roof, energized, but like, when you have a lot of time to think about it, you start to get in your own head. And I started thinking, what if I'm not good enough? Like, what if I'm not ready for this? What if it's too soon? You know, this is prime time. But I'm never going to turn down the opportunity. And so it was, again, one of the best things that's ever happened to me. But you start to, you know, feel that self-doubt, all the nerves. It's, you know, am I ready for this moment? Which I think is, you know, it can be a good thing because it means you're human. It means you care. It means you want to be good. But it ended up being one of the best experiences for the 4 years that I did it, working on, you know, those games, and I had to power through. And so we're all going to face that. You're all going to face it. It still happened to me. And like I said, I graduated in '07. I've been doing this for a long time, and just with Fox for 11 years, and still having those moments of self-doubt, but power through, because sometimes other people see in you what you might not be ready to see in yourself. But believe in yourself and it'll happen.
That's really great advice. Thank you. And just, you know, it is internship season. A lot of us are applying and working on our resumes, our cover letters, trying to become as marketable of future employees as we can to possible employers. What are ways that we can set ourselves apart in the business because it's constantly evolving?
So one thing I'll say is, I mean, first off, like, be a hard worker. That's number one. When I was interning, I ended up years later working at one of the stations that I had interned for in Miami. And I remember at the time being, you know, there were some other interns that weren't necessarily, you know, they were just there to get the credit, really. And so they were happy just kind of doing the minimum, but I was hungry. And I was, every day I came in, it was like, what can I do? You know, I was excited to just, for me, it wasn't just about, obviously the goal was to be on air, but I got my reps on air because I walked in and I said, you know, can I transcribe, you know, the sound from, you know, whatever. I was working in the WTVJ, so it was like they're covering Dolphins training camp and Miami Heat games and the Marlins. And so it's like, can I transcribe all of the sound from practice? Can I log video? Whatever I can do, I wanted to do. Edit highlights. One of my highlights made it on the air that night. It meant everything to me. And so I was constantly in there, not just to, you know, sit around. I think some of the other interns were just like on Facebook or MySpace at the time. That tells you how old I am. But for me, I was just like, no, like, teach me. I want to learn. It means everything. And so go in and be open, because I know a lot of people want to get into being on camera. But obviously there's other great roles as well, producers, directors. But be willing to learn everything. Like, if they would have handed me a camera and said, go out and shoot a baseball game, I'd have been like, what? Okay, just tell me how to, you know, hit this button. They wouldn't have trusted me to do that, but I would have been open to doing it. So do everything you can. Get there early, show up late. And then those are for your internships. But even, I think now, as the business is evolving, being not being one-dimensional, you know, like, even with me, I still love the fact that I get to cover two sports, you know, not just football, covering the NBA as well. Next week I'll be at the Big East tournament, so covering college basketball. Even a lot of the producers I work with, they do a little bit of everything, being a reporter, but also hosting as well. And like I said, a lot of the producers I work with, they produce features, they produce live games, they produce pre-produced shows. So making sure that you can do everything and getting experience in working in everything and learning what everybody else does at their job will give you a better understanding and also make you better at what you do.
Well, thank you so much. I think, yeah, that is all the time we have. I appreciate all of the answers you've given and all the advice for all of us, and thank you for speaking with me.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
I promise it's not just me.
Good morning, everyone. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the panel, which is Sean Humphrey, sports at CJC student. Sean, come on up. Sean will be moderating and is going to be introducing our other panel members. So you guys can all start coming up too.
You want a double introduction?
No, no. It's like, join me up here.
Okay, so joining Christina Pink up here, you all now know who Christina Pink is. If you didn't know, now you know. But first up, she is the Senior Vice President of Media and Content for the Washington Commanders, one of the faces of DMV sports. After over a decade in the region, she started her career in sports TV in 2003, has worked the Olympics thrice, that's 3 times, and she is the first woman to be a regular member of an NFL radio broadcast booth. University of Florida class of 2000, Julie Donaldson.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, he is the Sports Illustrated co-editor-in-chief. He joined as an associate producer in 1998. He's been there ever since. Rung by rung, he climbed the ladder up to the top. He's also a die-hard Tampa Bay Lightning fan. UF class of 1997, Ryan Hunt. Next up, Paramount Plus's Senior Vice President of Program Marketing and Sports and News. He was DAZN, I just learned how to say that yesterday, DAZN's Head of Marketing in North America. He's also worked at the NFL, DirecTV, and Verizon in marketing, but he started out right here at UF in production at WUFT News. He graduated University of Florida class of 1995, Rob Stecklow.
Good job on the zone. Always throws people off.
Hey, I learned it yesterday, like I said. I was saying Days Inn before, but that's a hotel. All right, so to start off, the future of sports media, when you all hear that, what does it mean to you?
Well, being at a sports streamer or a streaming company, I think we're right in the middle of it. So if you're not familiar with Paramount Plus, how many people know what Paramount Plus is? How many people know that we have live sports? Yeah, so about half the room. So, you know, the streaming industry and where sports is headed, a lot of options. So I think it's, you know, a pretty interesting time to be in sports because TV is such an important part of it as well. So we're in this transition where you have all these streamers and you have live TV. Where I think it's headed in the future, if you say maybe 10 years ahead, probably a lot more integration with betting, things that are going to be happening on the screen simultaneously, being able to probably watch multiple feeds at the same time. But it's really just such an exciting time in sports where all this convergence is coming together between all the different screens.
For me, I think it's how you consume your content. Like when I was starting my career, everything was desktop. And now you get everything on your phone, and where people find their news, the type of content that they're consuming, that has changed dramatically, especially over the last 5 years. It's going to continue to evolve, and I think as media organizations try to think about the audience that they're trying to reach and the content that resonates with them, like think about how you are consuming content as you approach the industry. That's what we're doing on a daily basis at SI, is trying to understand the audience, the content that resonates with them, and how can we produce it and deliver it to them timely.
The big thing for us, especially working now on the franchise side, coming from a regional sports network, the future of regional sports networks is very uncertain right now, and we're all just kind of sitting back trying to figure out, like, where is the marketplace going to land? And to your point, it's like, how is it being consumed? It's on your phone first, your tablet, your computer, your desktop, and then maybe even at the end you might be streaming it up on your actual television. But the word linear is almost like archaic at this point, the way that people are consuming. But we're all trying to figure out, you here in the room, where are you going to watch, how are you going to watch, and how can we get money from you for that? Because that's the big thing, too, is you don't want to have to pay for it. So we're all trying to figure out how can we monetize the programs that we're creating, where are you going to go to try to consume that? And then also where, you know, again, what are you consuming it on? Is it TikTok? Is it Twitter? Is it Instagram? Is it Twitch? And how can we meet you there with what that content has to be created for that specific platform?
Or a medium that doesn't even exist yet.
Yeah.
Created in this room, possibly.
Yeah, and I was just gonna hit on for me, like the social media aspect is still evolving. I mean, the thing that that's changed a lot in like our job is like the immediacy of everything. Like when I started, you just had to get your stuff up because it aired at 9 or 10 p.m. On the news that night, and now things got to get up because social media is 24 hours. So before you had plenty of time to like turn stories and get it on the air. Now it's like, okay, send out that tweet, get it on social, get it on Instagram. I don't have TikTok yet, but that'll be the next one. Or, as you said, a medium that's probably going to emerge in the next couple of years. So the immediacy of content and how quickly you can get it out there has certainly, is going to be even more rapid in the future.
So with a sport like football, it's one that everybody here is involved in some way, shape, or form, and it's one that everybody in America is going to watch one way or another. You don't really have to do too much to get an audience to watch the NFL. So what incentivizes you to try something new, and what happens when you try something new with it?
I think you have to be different. There's so much content out there. I mean, the NFL appetite is insatiable. It is a 12-month-a-year sport. Whether it's free agency, the draft, the regular season. There's the appetite for sports news is there's a lot of outlets that are covering it really well. So how do you stand out? How do you be different? What's the type of content that's going to make somebody who's scrolling through their feed stop and say, "Oh, I'm interested in that." Like, I think that's the debate that our editors are tackling every day is like what's going to really resonate? Like, how do we differentiate from the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Ringer, the Athletic, whomever, your local outlets? There's a ton of content out there. It's like, I think, trying to think about new ways to reach an audience with content that's different. But the appetite is there, like, by leaps and bounds.
I like how you said it's a year-round sport. People always ask me, what do I do during the off-season? I'm like, excuse me? There really is no official off-season. I'm yet to take a probably legit vacation as I just finished my 3rd season with the team. But I think a lot, and you were touching this, like, is sports betting. I think a lot of that's going to be, especially now that it's being legalized in so many different marketplaces, how is that going to factor into how we're kind of consuming the game? And I think that's going to change it dramatically, too.
You get 3 days in June.
Yeah, possibly.
And the NFL is one of the few sports that people are still watching full games. So for someone like Paramount, we use it to acquire customers. But then the question is, when the games are over, what else can we give them? Whether it's sports, entertainment, original programming, more NFL programming that we can create. I mean, it's a big acquisition driver. You see that Google just bought the rights with YouTube to the NFL Sunday Ticket package. They want to get people into their YouTube TV. So the NFL is still in this king position where they're still people are still buying whatever product just to watch those live games. So it's really like, how else can you monetize them when the games end?
So I have the benefit of being a part of the game broadcast, so I haven't had to adjust too much, but to Julie, one of the cool things that I think is that, like, the team content, everything that happens on those digital platforms, the shows that you guys put on, like, for me, I go and look at those things, like when I'm trying to learn about teams, the training camps, some of the coverages that you guys put together, the podcast, like all of those sort of things. I think that's the wave of the future. Sitting down, I think being able to create your own content, like, that's new. And so centering around a sport like the NFL that is like people never get tired of talking about, if you can find something that hits, whether it's an angle or a story that hasn't been done before, and it might take a little bit of time, there's always an appetite for it because the NFL is so popular.
I think the other dynamic is a lot of the athletes want to control their own stories too, and they want to be the delivery source. They want to be their own medium, and I think that's where building trust with athletes, so that they know that you can tell their stories, and it will be told fairly, honestly, truthfully. That's a huge part of the business, building those relationships, so that when you want to tell those stories, the athletes trust you to be able to do so in a way that they see fit.
Especially in the NFL, right? That's the hardest sport to learn who the athletes are. They're wearing helmets. You don't really get a picture of what their life is like off the field. Every other sport, especially like NBA, you see them all the time, and there's they're kind of in the culture and doing what you're saying. It's like they're building their own brands. I think the NFL is a little behind there. So all this other content is just going to help them grow in popularity.
So Ryan, you've been in print for 25 years. I think we all know print's dying. but we also know
Ouch.
we also know you can't really.
Stings.
I mean, hey, Alpha
I'm
and
just
Omega.
keeping it real.
beginning and end. But at the same time, you can never really kill print because writing is such an important skill in journalism in general. So where have you all seen print continue to have an importance in this line of work?
I think there will always be room for it. I think the business is changing. Like the amount of people. I mean, right now the only sports magazine out there is Sports Illustrated, and I think from an advertising perspective, that has actually helped in some ways. When ESPN, the magazine, ceased operations, you know, if you want to reach advertisers who are in print, I mean, it's tangible. You can hold it. Like, how many people have ad blocker on their computers? I mean, you can. If you're an advertiser, there's only so many ways to reach your consumers that you want to, that are sports fans. So I think there's always going to be a market for it. But like Sports Illustrated though has changed. I mean, it used to be a weekly. The content that you would cover in a weekly magazine is entirely different than the content you would cover in a monthly. I think of when Tiger won the Masters, one of the most iconic SI covers of all time, and no words on it, just Tiger celebrating. That's a story that wouldn't be covered in a monthly magazine because the issues close too quickly. It has to hold up over a certain amount of time. You have to think about content differently for print in a monthly magazine than you do a weekly. I mean, we've already closed the April issue, like, and you know, here we are on March 1st, or let's say March 2nd. But you know, so I think there's always going to be room for print, and even digital has evolved. Like how people. My first job was I was a beat writer for the Alligator. I wrote in tons of stories in college. 27 years ago, I was in your shoes. I covered the football team, covered the basketball team, covered the women's basketball team. I did everything I could to put myself in a position to get a beat writer job. My first job ended up being cutting photos and writing photo captions on a digital website, which nobody was doing at the time. I think I wanted to bet on myself and try to see where the industry was going. I learned some skills that I learned Photoshop. There was certain things that I added to Christina, your point about not being one-dimensional, trying to accumulate all these skills that could help you down the road, but embracing an opportunity that was right in front of me. I think that the way the industry is going to go too, I think, kind of pivoting off of your question, I think that's what everybody's going to have to do, is like understanding that the industry is going to be changing. So but the skills that you're going to need, are going to probably hold up over whatever medium it is. So that was a long-winded way to try to answer your question to get a point in there. But I think print, will always exist. It's just how people consume content is always changing.
I would agree it's how are you consuming it? What are you consuming? In our day today, and I'm in the position now, I mean, you really spoke to it, Christina, it's like you have to be able to be more than one-dimensional. I'm in the position now in my career where I get to hire. And if you come with me with one skill set, I can't hire you because I need somebody that can do more. I need somebody that can, anybody, I feel like a lot of people can stand up and do a stand-up and do an interview, but can you write to that? Can you edit the video? Can you come up with the stories yourself? Can you ask the questions? Can you produce? And there's a lot of different aspects that go into that. But as far as like print, why don't we just say maybe more the written word?
Yeah.
A lot of that. Like people might not necessarily have newspapers anymore, but you're still on your phone scrolling all day long. And it might be that photo or the quick 20-second video or something that captures your attention, and then you read maybe a quick little 3-4 paragraph blog on it. I'm always telling our folks, like, you're writing too much. People don't have time in their day to spend 5 minutes to read one little article on, whatever the touchdown, whatever the moment you're trying to explain. So you have to put it in very digestible pieces. As we become more like a little fishbowl, society of how we consume information and our attention span. And then if it's incredibly compelling, you can afford to do maybe the longer in-depth pieces, but those take time. But it's still there, it's just how we consume it.
And also big brands like SI isn't dying, right? So maybe the magazine, that portion is a different audience. But as someone who works at brands where we spend a lot of money to reach sports fans, we still go to someone like an SI because they have a big audience. They have eyeballs, whether it's in a physical magazine or digital or on a phone, on a desktop. I mean, they're reaching sports fans, so we want to be there to promote the products we have. So I think the good thing is as the industry is changing, these big brands are evolving and staying a big part of the sports fan ecosystem.
And I know very few print beat writers who just only write. To speak to what we were all saying, like most of them have made TV appearances or gone on to do, speak on radio or podcasts. So it's not dying in the sense that it's ever going to go away, because I feel like, especially locally, like I'm always reading, hey, what's this article on this team that I've got coming up? And hyper local news is the best way to find that information, but it's just being able to kind of pivot a little bit.
And you see something like The Athletic doing that,
Yeah.
where if you're going to go to a certain market and you want your team, SI might not have everything on your specific team, but if you go to a local like an Athletic, or even now I think the franchise is part of what I'm doing, is take back ownership of our messaging and take back ownership of the content that we have, so people come to us for that. And then it becomes, you've got to be able to pay maybe $1.99 or whatever it is to be able to get that.
You're always back to the money piece.
I'm in the business. Now the part of my job is having to understand that I've got the P&L report.
You can't sugarcoat that, because it is an incredibly important part of this industry, and making sure that you're sustainable for the future going forward. Like, how are you going to build a business around it, and having the editors and the writers understand, like, hey, this is the content that resonates, and if you're a restaurant and nobody's coming to it, you could have the best food in the world, but if nobody's eating it, it's going to close, right? So you have to be able to make sure you're satisfying your audience. I mean, they're the ones that matters.
Yeah, you saying sustainable segues into my next question very well. I know consistency is super important in this industry. If people can't trust you, they won't read your stuff. They won't care what you have to say because you don't have credibility. But in a social media world where the big moments get shared over and over and over again, especially Rob, I saw that you all tweeted out that Paramount Plus would have the Super Bowl next year. So that's a year in advance. So how much does consistency matter in this social media age, and how do you kind of all have to combat, go back and forth with I guess the social media world when people are kind of just posting things for clout and getting attention?
Yeah, so social media is really tricky because you had mentioned it's 24/7. I'll give you a good example. When I was at DAZN, so we in the U.S. had a lot of boxing, and there was a big debate always of during a live fight, do we post something that happens immediately, or do we want to encourage you to sign up to watch the whole fight? And we would go back and forth, because you know what would happen if we didn't post it? 50 other people would post it, and then they'd get the credit for this highlight. And it would be not big brands like SI, it would be smaller bloggers that were taking illegal content, but they didn't care. But once it's out there, it's out there. So the strategy had to be, how do you balance that? A big moment is happening, we have to kind of show people that, but still get you to subscribe to watch longer content. So social media is a really big part of what we're doing in marketing, and it's ever evolving and ever changing.
I think at the end of the day, credibility is always number one. And I think the rush now to get content out or to get news out, it's still important to first make sure the facts are there. And so I think at the end of the day, we all want to be, well, for me, it's different because I do still prioritize the broadcast aspect of it. So I'm not the best when it comes to the social media side. But I know you want to make sure that the viewers trust you. And even more important, I talked about the relationship building, because once you burn a bridge, it is very hard to repair. So you don't want to rush to get a story out there or to get a clip out there and then burn a relationship with an athlete or a player or a coach. So I think walking that fine line and making sure you have the balance is important.
Credibility for sure, and especially I think now, when I came over from being a journalist, and my boss I don't like that word in my new position, and I'm like, but that's what got me to this position, is that I've spent 20 years as a journalist and I understand this business. But when you're on the team side, of course, you do have to be a little bit team friendly, as I have learned. At times having my rib slashed because it was maybe a little bit too difficult of a question as a journalist that you naturally would go for. So I've just learned, okay, well, I still need to ask this question. Let me find a different way maybe to ask it. That's a little bit maybe, because part of my training was in New York City. There's no time to go around it a nice way in softball. You just got to go straight forward. Otherwise, you're never going to get the sound bite or the question out that you need.
Trust with your audience. Sorry, didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt
no.
you. Trust with your audience and trust with your sources. If you don't have those things, it's going to be really difficult to survive in this industry. I think back to probably the most proud moment of my career was when Sports Illustrated broke the story of LeBron James going back home to Cleveland, right? That was a story that was almost 15 years in the making, because it dates back to when Grant Wall wrote the initial, the Chosen One piece when LeBron was a junior in high school. But how SI covered LeBron over his career. And if you, in LeBron's office, he has all of the SI funding. He's been on 30 at this point. But all of that work dated back to one story in 1998, I believe, when he was a junior in high school. And 15 years later, it led to one of the biggest scoops that everybody in the world was chasing. Like, where's LeBron going to go? SI was able to get it because it built trust with LeBron and was able to sustain it over those years with how we have covered him.
One thing you don't see, though, is there are times where credible sources, Adam Schefter and others, break stories and then they turn out to be false. But there's really nothing happens to them or their credibility going forward. I mean, there was a story that broke about Aaron Judge becoming a Giant, and then it was like, oh, no, he's not. I mean, so why would I ever believe that writer again? And then it's sort of like in this world, 5 minutes later, everyone forgot that happened, and he's back to a trusted source, breaking news again. So it would be great to see if there were some guardrails put in place that if you're going to break news that is not credible, like you shouldn't have a voice, potentially, or can you go on probation? I don't know what the answer is, but it feels like there's nothing happens,
You could delete a tweet. That's the one thing about print. You can't. You're not unprinting that. Like,
yeah.
It's like, yeah. But I think everybody the push to be first often overrides the push to be right. And I would rather our writers be right 1,000% of the time than being first. Obviously you want both. But,
right.
But being because that could, if you get a big story wrong, it could that erodes that trust.
So, Rob, you just talked about attention spans when it comes to accountability on social media, but I want to talk about attention spans in general. There haven't been just 3 networks in a while now. So just having to compete with a bunch of different social media platforms, whether it's individual people covering content, different sports going on at the same time, the competition is ongoing and has been seemingly since the beginning of time. So how do you make your event the one people want to see on your platform?
One of the metrics that we look at closest is time on page. Like, if we hear all the time, oh, people don't want to read 3,000-word stories. I find that to be false. If it's informative, if it's educational, if it entertains you, people will stick with it. Like, especially if you got that hook and it catches you, people will read. Like, people still read. I firmly believe that, and the metrics prove that. Like, we'll have people that are in stories 5, 7, 8, 10 minutes at a time, and I think to me that's a bigger, just as big of an arbiter of a success as how many page views it gets. Because if you can get people, they stay on the page. We have, if you have Chartbeat, you can see how far they're scrolling, like both on desktop and mobile. We look at those. Okay, well, if they're cutting out halfway through the story, maybe this story was too long, or how could we have improved it, or are they actually clicking, all of these other things that we're putting in the story. Time on page is a huge metric for us. Like that's how we dictate. Okay, this actually was, captivated our audience and it did its job.
I mean, there's metrics, to your point, on everything. How many new views do you get? How many organic views? How many are returning? How long are they staying into the programs that we're putting out there? And I think if you have very compelling pieces, they'll stay. Again, for us, I might not be able to be as journalistic maybe as I was before, but a lot of times now journalism has gone to be just, your opinion. And with what we try to do is I've never held back any of my analysts from saying what they feel went right or went wrong, because there are things that they need to improve upon. So people trust that we're going to be fair in our assessment of what's going on. Therefore, I think a lot of times they'll repeat, they'll come back because they realize they're actually going to get good information there. So we get a lot of return. And then to your point, if nobody knows it's there, they don't know. So you have to be able to spread the word and market it so people know where to come. But if it's really compelling and they're learning something from it, they'll come back and they'll stay.
Yeah, you're not just writers, you're marketers. And that's just your personal brand and your content.
Yeah, we try and employ like a strategy when we're trying to get you to come in for a live event to flood social media that day with content, because we know the attention span is all over the place. You know, one of our big properties is Champions League soccer, and so that's, you know, it's a little more niche. It's not mainstream like NFL or college football. The games take place during the week, but we know there's an audience there and it's growing. And so one of the things we have to do is keep an awareness of that we have the property, but on the days where there are matches, like if you're on Instagram, Snapchat, et cetera, there's just a ton of content we're pushing out because we want to make sure we're flooding your social feeds. So that's like, oh, the game's on today. I should, you know, either subscribe or I have to watch. We also are able to, thankfully, through our app, we're able to alert you when things are happening. So if we know you like a certain sport, you know, a push alert will come on, game's about to start. And so those are things that, you know, it's like you're like an alarm clock in your phone, but like, you know, hey, something's happening. So, you know, and to your point on data, like we can tell if that's helping or hurting. Some people may not want to see those and then they cancel their subscription. I don't, you know, they're bothering me. So it's a delicate balance, but, you know, these are all the tools we have at our disposal to try and get the attention when the events are on.
So I'll just say for the game side of things, I have mastered just making sure I'm concise in my reporting, which I think just helps me overall, because everyone, they do have short attention spans. Like, I got to get my information out really quickly. And if I feel like there's a, you know, a longer piece that I want to talk about, that's something I can do in our pregame shows. Because at the end of the day, like if you can't get the story out in like 30 to 40 seconds, one, there's a play clock, so that helps as well, because I got to get the information out before the snap. But people kind of lose interest and they stop paying attention. So that's where you drive them to the web. You can post more content or elaborate more on what you want to talk about. Or, like I said, I'm able to get a little bit of longer information pieces in the pre and post game coverage.
You know, the biggest ads we buy on Google are 30-second skippable, right? So there's 5 seconds where you're watching. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. So we sometimes have to cram in like a mini promo in the 5 seconds that then gets you to watch the next 25 seconds. So it's like you have to draw people in. And Google has algorithms and they have creatives that can help you figure this whole thing out, because our goal is that at the 6th second, you don't just X out of it. And so think about that. You have 5 seconds to get someone's attention, or they're on to the next video.
I mean, that's how the majority of people are finding content these days. If you want to read about Carson Wentz getting released, people are typing in Carson Wentz, right?
Yep.
Like, and then if you, so no SEO, because like that's, because that's, you understanding where your audience is coming from and what you're trying to serve with them is paramount. No pun intended.
So what we're saying is get good, really good at writing short, concise, and attention-grabbing marketing to, you know, get that attention quickly.
Also, I just like with using social media and the insights that you get from like professional pages, it's crazy to me sometimes to look and like post a story and it shows you the exact moment where people will watch or stop watching, and very few times will you see the entire, you know, if you're posting a 5-minute video, do people watch till the end? It's like you'll see like the 2-minute mark, sometimes the 1-minute mark, where people start to drop out. So even me seeing that is like, okay, try to get the information out faster. Or more importantly, that's why I say writing a strong lead in, get to the important stuff first that draws people in so that they pay attention and stick with you longer.
So people in this room know I am a San Antonio Spurs diehard. Nobody cares about the Spurs. If I asked everybody in this room, raise your hand if you would watch a Spurs game tomorrow if I paid you. There's a few, but
They're getting ready for the weekend.
yeah, the Spurs, even when the Spurs are good, it's where media attention goes to die. One of the lowest rated finals of all time, the 2007 NBA Finals, and we had LeBron James in that series. So when you have teams that don't like to, they don't like the attention, and you have teams that it's hard to force people to care about, but they're on the biggest stages, like the Spurs in the NBA Finals. Like, who's ready? Like, nobody cares. Like, how do you tailor content and just make the broadcast important?
I mean, it's a huge challenge. I was just talking with a couple of friends of mine who work for ESPN, but they're saying, like, unless it's like March Madness or unless it's like the finals, or it is your big teams, your big money drawers, it is very hard to get people to really pay attention, and you're seeing a lot of networks kind of cut back a little bit in how they're producing. And I was even surprised that he's still having to call games off a television monitor, because they learned during COVID you can do that. And if it's not a big moneymaker broadcast, then why not just cut corners a little bit? And so it is something that I think we're still trying to kind of figure out in a sense, especially now you have so many different networks. You got the SEC network, the ACC network. So where are you going to subscribe to these places to get that content that you want? And how do you market to the person that wants it? Because you're not going to be able to get somebody who doesn't care about the Spurs to watch that game.
Yep.
But you still need to, just trying to get that out there, and where does that live and how?
I think fun, making a broadcast fun is part of it, because, for example, I just worked a game on Friday night between the Clippers and Kings where the final score was 176-175. That was not an all-star game. That was a game. It's easy to get people to watch. That game went to double overtime. But what about the games where it's 30-point blowout in the second half? That's where great producing comes into play, great storytelling comes into play, where you have to make the broadcast entertaining. And, that at the end, I keep saying at the end of the day, but that's important. And so I think that there's a way to still keep viewers watching, especially if you're a diehard, you're going to watch no matter what. But the casual viewer is going to continue to watch if you give them reason to watch. So as a reporter, it's really easy when you have a game that's going down to the wire, and that's when it's fun, and that's when people are going to continue to watch no matter what. But when it's 40 points, like the deficit, and they're saying, hey, Christina, you got more? You got more? And that's where my preparation comes in, because I might come in with 7 or 8 stories, and if we have a great game, it's never going to get on the air. But you got to have that stuff ready, because they want to keep the broadcast entertaining, keep things compelling, so that you can continue to keep the viewer engaged.
I don't think that's necessarily related to market size. Just took the Super Bowl, like Eagles, Chiefs, the Eagles, huge market, right? Chiefs, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. We sent a number of writers to Phoenix, and we're covering every nook and cranny of the game. How the Eagles gonna cover Travis Kelce? The Kelce brothers. At the end of the day, Mike, you just said that more people cared about whether the Bears were going to trade the number 1 pick. 113 million people watched the game. Were they all interested in every little facet of it, or did they want to see the ads? Did they want to see Rihanna? You have to understand what the audience is interested for each specific event. How you can tailor content that they're going to engage with, and your coverage plan may differentiate between the Super Bowl, between March Madness. March Madness moves so fast. You fill out your brackets. Everybody wants to see if they're, what the experts are saying. Who's going to advance to the Final Four. But by then, an upset at 12 o'clock, if the number 2 seed goes down, could be forgotten by 7 o'clock if somebody else loses.
This goes back to one of my earlier points. So what are the regional sports networks doing? And every executive, every franchise, every league is trying to figure this out, and nobody has the answers yet. NFL is trying to figure out, will NFL Plus work? Will you pay to get Commanders information? Will you pay to watch the games if you're out of market and you can't get it because you're not there? We're all still trying to figure this out.
You're learning every day.
By the way, the Spurs used to be really popular, and so I'm just happy my Knicks are actually pretty good this year. But I think, in summary, it's really hard when you to generate a new audience or to create new fans. But one of the beauties, and you mentioned it, of a tight game now with social media, you can drive people in to watch the fourth quarter. There's ways to buy that, on your phone, even if you're out of market. And so I think that's exciting. So maybe I wasn't interested in the game at the start, but now you're at 160 to 159 with 5 minutes left. Wow, I got to check that out. Or such players at 65 points will we hit 70. So there's new ways to get people in. And the cumulative effect isn't how many people watch the game from the beginning. It's how many people ultimately engaged with that content, whether it was live at the end or post. So you kind of think of it that way. Oh, actually, you know what? The Spurs, there was a pretty big, overall output there.
So Tom Brady just retired. LeBron James is 38. These are stars that people want and need to see no matter what. But where is the balance between the media and the athlete as far as making stars goes?
Well, I mean, baseball, to take one example, has struggled to find a superstar that has broken through the mold. I mean, Shohei Ohtani is probably the most famous across the world. I mean, not just here in the States, but baseball has continued, and probably that's why baseball is where it is today. Like because it hasn't had that singular star. I mean, I think it's tough. I mean, I don't think it's the media's job to make stars. I think the media is more interested in telling the stories that are going to resonate with the audience, and usually that is about the most popular players. But it's not really our job to try to make the next star of tomorrow. I mean, although Sports Illustrated has done that in the past with LeBron James, and how the cover of the last issue was Victor Wembanyama, who will be probably the #1 pick in next year's NBA draft. But the reason why SI is putting Victor Wembanyama on the cover of the magazine is not because we're trying to make the next star. He is probably the most electrifying basketball prospect in decades. 7'5", wingspan. If you've seen his clips, he's astounding. Like, he's going to change the game in ways that we haven't seen. Or he might not. You know? Right. I mean, we put Sebastian Telfair on the cover too, and you can link to the ones that work, the Bryce Harpers, the LeBron James, but you don't get them all right. But I think we're interested in telling the stories. Hey, this might be the next big thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
I think for us, we are very, you need stars because that's what's going to garner the attention to watch throughout the game. Like, we need the Chase Youngs, but we also need the Chase Youngs on the field playing as well, to be able to be the Chase Youngs that are drafted 2 overall, winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, and that are going to get people to tune in to watch how is he going to get after whichever plug of the name quarterback. We need people to be interested in our stars because that draws the attraction, the attention into the game. We need to know, like, what is the receivers, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, going to do with the young rookie quarterback, or name in a big star quarterback that we've been trying to do. We're always trying to find that right star mix, not only because, one, yes, of course, it's going to help you win games, and the more you win, the more people will tune in and watch. That is a direct correlation to business and to viewership is winning. But also, because it helps the brand, it helps the interest, it helps tell the stories, it helps overall all content consumption is when you do have those stars. And a lot of them too, we run into a little bit on the business side, is some of them get so big into their own stardom that it's a distraction. And it deters from what they're actually there for, and it can be an issue. So I think there's a lot of management on that side as well.
I think at the end of the day, my phrase of the day, but talent makes you a star. We don't make stars, but I do think, one, flashiness, like on the NBA side, guys like Ja Morant who have like big time highlights, people love that. And Luka, the guys who are constantly making like highlight reel plays, those are the ones that people are drawn to. But I also think, again, talent comes first, the star plays, but also like the big personalities as well. That's why people love guys like the Kelsey brothers, because not only are they phenomenal athletes, but they also have the personalities that draw people in as well. And that makes it easier to cover those guys because it's so easy to do those interviews, have those conversations, and now being able to take that on yourself and having the podcast and that avenue. So media coverage is important, and just kind of we're the facilitators to get that information out there. But at the end of the day, the stars are going to be the stars because they're winning championships and they're making the championship
Or the ones that get people talking, like Patrick Beverly is a perfect example. He's not a star.
If they don't have the talent, nobody wants to hear, they don't want to consume it. If they don't have the talent, why are you telling us to care about this guy? So the talent has to be the leading factor.
There's also, in the last 10 years or so, a lot of the big stars have been able to break out their personalities by getting into more off-the-field media ventures. Good examples like Peyton and Eli Manning, who are retired. But those guys are, front and center, and probably everyone in this room watches a lot of their content. They have their own production company. They're getting involved in other sports. And they've done a good job at marketing themselves and keeping them in the spotlight. So, yes, they won on the field. They're really fun people and interesting, so those things have to come. But then they've, kind of taken that to the next level by building themselves into a brand. I mean, LeBron has done the same thing, right? He has his own production company. He's producing content with other athletes. So that's not easy either. But you kind of, to the point of like the media can't just say this is the guy, or girl. Like we can't, you gotta win and get people interested, and then you can kind of create your own media surrounding it.
So what changes, especially in a sport like basketball, when player mobility is at what seems like an all-time high, and guys are sitting out any given night when you don't know who's going to play before the injury report comes out? How does your approach change?
Christina, why don't you start with that one?
I don't know if the approach necessarily changes because for me, I'm covering the game regardless. You just pivot in your storytelling, so that's why the preparation is important because I can't have 8 stories on one player and then that player is not going to go and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a second. So knowing, having the depth in your research to be able to talk about multiple athletes, having multiple angles prepared. But that's just the nature of the game, The game's evolved, and that's not something that's new. Your Spurs, They were DMP rest. They were the first ones to start that. So you just got to be able to adjust and be able, to do your homework, do your job, come in prepared enough to be able to talk about, not just the quarterback, not just the star player. Like my favorite thing, I love talking to offensive linemen when it comes to on the NFL side because a lot of guys, they don't get talked to a lot, so they're excited because you're like, hey, like you guys want to talk to me, and so being able hey, the offensive line is a big part of it, and talking to assistant coaches who can give me great insight on those guys, but it's just doing your homework and being ready. So yeah, I'm gonna have a story prepared on Kawhi and Paul George, but I'm also gonna have information on other guys. So as soon as someone's in, someone's out, it's like, all right, boom. I'm emailing my producers. I've got this ready to go. But when the lineup's out, okay, we're going to do this instead. So it's just having the depth in your coverage to be able to pivot at a moment's notice. And that's also something you get with time. I wouldn't say I was able to do that so quickly when I first started 11 years ago. I'd write everything out, have everything done, and then right before you'd hear hey, so-and-so just got hurt in warm-ups. And it's like, no, okay, boom, But being able to talk to coaches, knowing, hey, this is the 3rd guy down, and if this guy's not going to go, we'll have that ready. But just being prepared. Preparation is key, and if you're prepared, you can handle anything.
It does seem, though, specific to NBA, that load management is an issue, right? And that I'm sure the commissioner, they're thinking about it in their new collective bargaining agreement, but, recently the Lakers were in New York and they played the Nets, and a bunch of stars, LeBron didn't play, right? And so you're a ticket holder, or you paid a lot of money for those tickets. That's a tough one. So I understand they're not going to cut back the amount of games, to your point of revenue like that. So what's the solution? You can't force people to play. So I do think that specifically in the NBA's instance, they have to figure it out, because it's kind of getting to that bubbling point of it's people are talking about it a lot.
Unfortunately, load management doesn't exist in the journalism profession.
Yes.
It could be a trade at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, and you're jumping on it. But I think leagues are asking the same questions. How do we engage with our audience and make them come back every night?
It's just the room for another great story to me. I mean, Tom Brady wouldn't be Tom Brady if he didn't have that opportunity. And we are forever, especially in football, you're forever anticipating somebody. One of the things that gets one of the most engagement is the active report, because everybody wants to know who are they starting on their fantasy team. So that's one of the highest things for us going into a game. And then, to Christina's point, there's always somebody willing to take the next step up. And as we go through with our franchise quarterback after quarterback, they all want to be out there, whatever the opportunity presents them to be out there and play and perform and show off their skill set. And so that actually can sometimes become some of the best storytelling that you can have, is when somebody that you're counting out and that isn't supposed to have an opportunity because they're sitting on their sister's couch watching the games, and then all of a sudden they're your starter for mostly 2 years straight, and they're excelling and leading you towards the post. Becomes amazing storytelling if those situations arise.
The Taylor Heineke story.
If you ever want to have a maddening experience, follow European soccer and the injuries, because those reports are worthless. and they announce people, or it's reported they're not going to play, and then sure enough they show up and they're in the starting lineups, or reverse, someone's just out for no reason and they had a knock.
Well, the entire
warm-ups.
media-athlete interaction is completely
Very
different in
different.
Europe.
Yeah.
Stars who've played their careers in England or in Europe come over to MLS to play in America, and they're stunned by the amount of media coverage, even in MLS. Like, oh, you have to talk to the press every day?
Right.
Like, what? Like they're shadowed from it. So, it's just a very different environment.
Then you got hockey, it's just lower body. What does that mean?
Yes. it's a broken leg, but he's going to skate.
Yeah. So, sports betting, how do you get ahead of the curve? That's a simple one, but it's a big question I don't think we've touched on yet.
It's ubiquitous already. I mean, it's only legal in a handful of states. I mean, it's more than a handful now, but I think it's just becoming legal in Massachusetts as we speak. I think understanding what an audience is looking for has been one of the things that we've been trying to I don't think we've cracked the code on sports betting coverage. And there's tons of people that are wagering every Sunday in the NFL or on basketball, baseball, college football, whatever. What is an audience looking for in sports betting? I would think we're still trying to understand what it means and how to cover it responsibly as a media organization. It's a big thing. I mean, it's not going away. It's only going to get bigger. Where does it go from here? I think that's the question we're all still trying to answer ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, for what I work on, it's a lot of that we talked about earlier, but like, what do people want to see, to your point, during a live broadcast? And so we debate this all the time. My point of view is like, I could watch on a big screen an event and then have my phone to bet. Do I need to see everything on the same screen? Do I need to use a remote to bet on my TV? So there's a lot of those discussions of how it all comes together. So it'll be fascinating to see what the end results are. But we do know that fantasy and betting makes a much more engaged consumer, and you end up watching sports for a longer time, and sports you generally maybe don't care about to your Spurs, before, like, oh, I'm watching that game because I have this wager and that wager, or I'm watching this golf tournament this weekend because I bet on these three guys. I mean, it's here to stay. It's just really, what do people want out of it?
It's why March Madness is what it is. It started with that. I mean, everybody filling out their brackets. I mean, that's why March Madness is the event that people, you don't even watch a single college basketball game all year. They're filling out their brackets, and, oh, is Gonzaga going to go, like, they're experts all of a sudden. But, I think that's trying to figure out how to cover, like I said, cover it responsibly is the big thing.
We tried for a couple of years at the Regional Sports Network to have a second screen, second broadcast that was just specifically for those that were betting on the game. Who's going to score the next touchdown? So you didn't even have to be the whole way in. It's just throughout the game that kept you engaged and kept you coming back, throughout the whole thing, because they're trying to figure out how can you, again, get people to stay for the duration of the game. It's the monetization of it. We just opened up a sports book at our stadium, and you're seeing a lot of places do that. The Capitals with the Wizards, downtown DC, because it's legal there, legal in Maryland, legal in Virginia now. We have sports books at every venue, and you're going to see that a lot going forward as well. Granted, legally I can because of my position, but nobody in the league like Christina can't step foot in a sports book.
I mean, the leagues probably secretly love it because the in-game betting changes, like how to get people to watch the whole game. In-game betting is probably changing that dynamic.
I've been working specifically a lot with lawyers lately because with it become now legal, like how can we now as a team have a podcast because people want this information because it's what they're more engaged with. How can then we create a podcast that legally is allowed? Now, I can't necessarily say it, but I can toss it to somebody else and have somebody else hired that can take care of that as well. So it's also kind of factoring into the consumption of content.
Anything? Okay. So we can't talk about the future of sports media or the future of anything really without talking about kids. I know it's the parents who are shelling out the dollars. It's the parents' attention that matters for advertisers. But do you keep children in mind when you're producing content, when you're putting things out for social media? And if so, like, what's different when you're thinking about children?
100%. My daughter was like my test case, like her consumption habits, where she's finding content. Like, hey, I'm looking at YouTube, I'm looking at Instagram, I'm looking at Snap. Like. Okay, I think understanding how the audience is continuing to evolve. Like you have to to be on top of that. Like if you're not creating content that is going to reach, if you're only reaching one specific audience, and as that audience gets older, like you got problems. But I've used my daughter as like as a test case, like for a lot of different things over the years. Like, hey, is this interesting to you? I mean, I think it's helped for SI with having SI for kids. I've heard all, like, for years, like, oh, I was a reader, subscriber. My parents subscribed to SI for Kids for me when I was a kid, and that's how I really got interested in journalism. And that's great. And I think the challenge has been getting people from SI to Kids to SI proper to continue to make them a consumer for life. It starts young. I mean, I think we're trying to continue. I mean, the kids of my generation are completely different than the next generation, and then the next one then will be from future kids. So you have to start young and understand all facets of your audience.
And fandom starts young. I mean, we've done so many studies on how and why you become a fan of a team, and it all starts with the moment in your childhood of, maybe you live here and we'd come across some that are, Cowboys fans. Well, because that might have been their first interaction with a player or an experience, the first jersey that they ever had. And then you become a fan of that. And one of our little marketing tools that we're just kind of starting up in the beta test of is when a baby's born at certain hospitals, we send them a Commander's shirt, a signed thing from Coach, and a blanket that they are forever part of the family. So talk about starting young. Like, we're hoping we can, get that next generation now fresh out of the womb while they're still there. But you do have to target a younger generation, because if somebody's here, if you don't already have a team, then more than likely you probably won't. You'll just adapt to whatever marketplace you're in. And kind of, I grew up in Jacksonville. There wasn't a professional team at the time where I grew up. So I bleed orange and blue here because that's where my fandom comes. But I don't have a professional football team. I become a team of whatever market I'm in and whatever team I'm covering because it's kind of good business. Don't tell my employer that. But, so yes, you do have to market to kids. We tailor content to them specifically as well, and things that we think will land.
To your point, my daughter, for the record, went home from the hospital in a Gator blanket, and now she's here, so it clearly worked.
Oh, nice. we work with Nickelodeon. That's one of the properties that Paramount owns. So they have a Slime Time NFL program, so that's on weekly. So there is an attempt to create content for the younger generation. I think a lot of it comes from superstars. Like a lot of the research I've seen over the years, people fall in love with superstars when they're kids too, so that helps. Where I think the biggest gap for the next generation of fans is going to be attending live games.
Yeah.
So I drag my kids, and my son's here today, but I drag my kids to a lot of live sporting events. So 2 of the 3 love it. But I think if you don't have a parent who's doing that now, and you're seeing you're working at a club, like getting people to go to games is really hard now in all sports, even here at the Swamp. When I was in school, it didn't matter who we played, the place was full, and now it's, the bigger games are, but it's just that creating that experience at a live event is what I think is really going to be an issue, say, 10, 15 years from now.
It's not just the kids. The experience at home is so great. Like, you got a 70-inch TV. You don't have to pay, $15 for a hot dog and a drink. It's probably undershooting it, but like.
And part of that is we want to create family-friendly zones. So if you do go to a game, you're not sitting around the, people that are there just for fun and maybe a little bit outrageous with their beverages. We want to try and create an atmosphere where you can be around it and it can be good family friendly, because you have to start them young and get them to like that experience and it be safe and affordable as well. But back to monetization is, you have the younger audience, but we need to figure out, again, if you're a fan, how can we still make money off of that fandom?
Yeah, I don't think, for me, I tailor anything specifically to the younger audience because I'm just reporting on the game. However, they're watching, they're watching. And for me, I remember, it's like I said, it's my 11th year between both sports, the NFL and the NBA, and having someone, I missed a Clipper game because of my NFL responsibilities and missed like a few games, and having someone on social media reach out because their kid was watching and was like, Christina, where have you been? My son's been watching and he was worried. And I was like, really? And he told me, he's 7 years old and doesn't know the games without seeing me there. And that was like, it was the coolest moment, and it made me realize, like, there is a generation of fans who has seen the broadcasts and knows, like, okay, and something similar happened to me on the NFL with someone who had been watching Thursday Night Football, and so, knowing that those young fans, are watching consistently, following their teams, they're there, and so we just want to have the viewers engage, enjoy the show, and like you said, hopefully we still want fans to go to games, but hopefully it's because the broadcast is so good that they're like, you know what, we'd rather see her on TV than actually go out to the game. But both is important, because that's how I became a fan. I became a fan from watching on TV, from going to games as a child, and that experience is unrivaled.
Well, I don't have a catchphrase or anything to wrap up, but I enjoyed the discussion. I'm sure everyone here enjoyed the discussion. Thank you all for coming back to the University of Florida to share with us today. How about a round of applause?
Good job, Sean.
That's all we got for now. Let's stand up in sync. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. It was wonderful.
All right, hello everybody. For those that do not know me, my name is Eric Esterline. I'm the director of the Sports Journalism and Communications program here. And today, CJC is introducing its 2 first inductees into its new Sports at CJC Ring of Honor. This recognizes UF alumni, faculty, and staff who've made an outstanding contribution to the sports journalism, media, and communication fields, and positively represent the values and impact of the college and its sports programs. Soon, we will proudly display an entire wall in our Innovation News Center that will recognize our great Gators, and thank you very much to Randy Wright for this ideation and for making this happen. As we meet and learn today at an event that is designed to inspire and inform students, emerging professionals, and the Gator community about the future of the sports media and communication industry, we are honoring 2 individuals that inspired at the highest level. Our first inductee is Dr. John Wright. During his 36 years at UF-CJC, John Wright served as Dean, Executive Associate Dean for Graduate Studies, Graduate Coordinator, and Interim Department Chair, the only person to have served in all of those roles at the college. John served as Interim Dean in 2007, and was Dean of the college from 2007 to 2012. During his watch, CJC began its partnership with the University Athletic Association, as well as moving Gator Vision headquarters into Weimer Hall. After stepping down as Dean in 2012, he became the college's inaugural director of the Sports Journalism and Communications program, where he worked with Journalism Department Chair Ted Spiker to design the popular sports and media specialization. John also taught multimedia sports reporting and created a sports podcasting class and was a mentor to many students who had an interest in sports and media. John retired from the college in 2018 and passed away in December of 2022. Personally, John hired me. He was a colleague, mentor, and a friend. He gave me confidence and assurance I could positively impact students in a meaningful way here at CJC. He was also a heck of a basketball player. I hope that I can make him proud by continuing to help grow the program that he started in guiding our students interested in sports during their time at CJC. Our first inductee to the Sports at CJC Ring of Honor is Dean and Professor Emeritus John Wright. All right. And to accept this award on his behalf is his wife, Pam Wright.
John would be thrilled and honored to know that he has been the first inductee into the Ring of Honor. He was always having a passion for sports is something we shared. I remember clearly when we first met, being the professor he was, would always ask me questions about sports. And one day he said, can you tell me what the original name was for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? I said, well, sure, Lou Alcindor. And he grabbed my hand and said, will you marry me? And I eventually did, but he's always had a passion for sports. It's been very important in our family, and he has the same passion for the college. And thank you so much for giving him this honor. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much, Pam. Now to announce our next inductee is Journalism Department Chair, Ted Spiker.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Pam, as well. And thank you to all the students here today and alums. It is an incredible joy to work with all of you who are just so amazing and so talented. And really love doing it every day. So thank you all for being here. I'm honored to say a few words about our next inductee, Edward Ashoff, who is a CJC alum and ESPN star who died in 2019 at the age of 34. Edward was a powerful presence here at UF and everywhere he went. Edward started his career covering Florida for the Gainesville Sun and soon landed a job at ESPN, mostly reporting on and writing about college football. He started in text, but moved on to adding in a lot of on-camera work, where he worked as a TV and radio sideline reporter and delivered stories on ESPN's large group of networks, SportsCenter, SEC Network, ESPN.com, and more. You would turn on the TV or look at his Instagram feed, and there was the award-winning Edward, undeniably the best-dressed sports reporter around, interviewing or telling stories about the biggest names in college football. After Edward passed away, the outpouring on Twitter and other platforms was massive. Most people, while expressing their profound sadness for this loss, mentioned how talented Edward was. But to a person, they also made sure to point out how kind he was, how he helped anyone who needed it, whether they asked for it or not. Because of that, I have no doubt Edward would have been here, right here with us today, to help us celebrate what we are doing with sports in Weimer Hall. So I want to briefly take you back to a moment in Weimer Hall that happened when Edward was a student in late September 2008. Edward was in my class that focused on helping students develop their writing voice and style. The prompt for the assignment was, write about an object. I didn't tell them anything else. I just wanted them to write about an object, with the hope being, I didn't want them to give me a physical description. I wanted them to find the meaning behind the object. Edward chose to write about a stuffed Mickey Mouse that he had when he was a baby. He started the piece off by explaining that Mickey had always been there for him during tough times. And this is part of his piece. I repaid his services by biting his nose off 3 times in the span of a year, ripping his head off after my mother threatened to ground me for flushing my milk down the toilet before dinner, and having him square off in backyard brawls with my cats. Each time the medic unit, consisting of my mother or grandmother, grew more and more annoyed at repeatedly performing needle and thread surgery on him. My grandmother estimated that Mickey's been through 20 different surgeries. Edward wrote that Mickey had been through it all. His first birthday, the first time he struck out, making the monumental trip to college from Mississippi to Florida. After so many repairs, the class figured that Mickey was long gone. But when we were done reading and talking about the story, Edward reached into his backpack like a magician standing in front of a top hat, and without saying a word, pulled out the battered and stitched and well-worn and well-loved stuffed Mickey, as if it were a trophy of both love and resilience. Everybody, of course, started crying. Edwards always knew the power of story was all about, what it was all about. A micro moment that is unique to one person, but reflects on a universal message that applies to all of us in a community. His story may have been about milk tantrums and Mickey's head being ripped off, but his message was about family, about comfort, about the things that help us heal. While everybody sitting around the table in the room on the first floor of Weimer Hall was crying, everybody was also smiling because Edward's words touched them. And that's what Edward Aschoff did. He always made you smile through his style, through his smarts, through his swagger, and through his stories. Edward Aschoff, it is an honor for the College of Journalism and Communications to induct him as an inaugural member of the CJC Sports Ring of Honor, and to accept this award, his fiancée, Katie Berteau.
I still have that Mickey. It's on my bed. Yeah, I got super emotional walking through the campus today, coming here this morning, because I realized when I was here, Edward was 3 years older than me, but he took 5 years to graduate. So we overlapped for 2 years here, but we never met here. We actually met at a wedding where I was a bridesmaid and he was a groomsman through friends that we met at UF. So we never would have met probably if it wasn't for this school and us both going here and our love for this place. He thought he was single-handedly responsible for the Jarvis Moss blocked kick at the South Carolina UF game because he was on drumline and he thought they made the most noise and created him, the situation for him to block that goal. So UF has always held just such a special place in his heart and my heart. This is where he really found and honed his love and passion for journalism and for also mentoring and helping people. His scholarship here is for underrepresented minorities in journalism. I'm really grateful that that's here too, and I'm really grateful for this award and him being inducted into the Ring of Honor. So thank you, and thank you, Ted.
Ends this portion of the program. So you can see up on the screens, we have the breakout rooms that are available. That's where you can go and grab your lunch as well. We got a little bit of time before we get started. Our Leadership Summit attendees, you can grab your lunch in 33, or right outside of 3310, I believe it is. And we will get started with those very shortly. Thank you all so much for attending this part of the program, and hope to see you in the breakout sessions.